one more episode of Manufacturing Growth Talks. I'm your host, Dan Burgos, and I have with me another peer, another colleague in the manufacturing sector that's, as everyone has, right, a journey through their career. They've been through things, and we're here to learn about their experiences, the challenges they've gone through, hear maybe some of the war stories that they've encountered, and hopefully at least extract for each one of you at least one nugget of knowledge that you can take back to your businesses and implement it and get the benefit of it. Uh, his name is Chris Borglum. He is president of K Park Recreation Corp. Chris, welcome.
Hi, Dan. It's great to be here. Pleasure to be on the show today.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for taking the time. I'm looking forward to hearing about your journey and some of the things that you've encountered, some of the lessons you've learned in the process.
Yeah.
So, Chris, why don't we start with, tell us about your journey, where you've been, what's your history, for people listening or watching that are not familiar with your journey thus far.
Okay. Um, so it started, actually back in high school with I work at the company that my dad founded when he was just a young guy, and I started working there part time during the summer and after school the rest of the year, and came here full time when I graduated. Worked for let's see, about 4 years after high school until the farm crisis nearly killed us. And at that time, we went less than half size. We went down to actually about a quarter of the operating size we were,
Oh
and
my.
it was an extremely tough time. And I took that opportunity and talked my dad into taking a sabbatical, and I went to college for a couple of years to get an engineering degree. And about that time I got done with that, the business was starting to come back, and they needed help. So I came back to the family business, and that would have been in probably 87 and 88. Um, I was a young guy, full of ideas, and chomping at the bit to get some leadership opportunities. And in 88, I got my first one. We had this one fiberglass division that was just really thriving at the time. And I saw the opportunity to offer to run a second shift so that we could get more stuff done. And it gave me an opportunity to be a leader. And so I jumped on that. And a few years later, the guy who was running the first shift left and went somewhere else. And so I took over that role. Um, so then in 1994, our plant manager of the steel fabrication, by far the bigger part of the company, uh, he he passed from lung cancer.
Uh,
And so they I was having fun doing what I was doing, but they recruited me to come over and run the steel fabrication. And so I did that uh, basically until 2016, um, when my mother had cancer and my dad left the company to go caretake for her. And so at that point, I took over the president role. And there was several. Well, there was probably a year or two where I thought I knew what I was doing. Another
uh,
year where I realized I don't have any damn idea what I'm doing. And then by the fourth year, my brother, him and I are 50-50 partners in this. And my brother and I, by the fourth year, started to figure it out. And, we've been on much steadier footing since then. We had some great times through the COVID years. And, I'll be honest with you, about the last year or so after the COVID money ran out has been a little tougher. But, uh, you know, we have we have a good idea of where we need to go and how to get there. So,
Yeah, I would say a lot of people would be with you and still are feeling the aftermath of the pandemic between inflation and supply chain disruptions, things like that. I'm still seeing people kind of carrying with that. And thank you so much for that walkthrough. Why don't we dive in? So uh, you've had a long history with the business, right? But
yeah,
sometimes, like I've had interactions with business leaders that the next generation wants no part of the manufacturing business. They're like,
right.
I don't want to be in a manufacturing shop floor. I don't want to do this and so on. So what about you? How was that for you in terms of deciding, yes, I want to go in, or maybe choosing a different path, a career path?
Um, no, I think I always knew that there would be a handoff at some point. And I think, my brother and I, uh, he's worked here, just as long as I have. And I think we both knew that, I was the natural leader, and that if he had an ego and wanted that role, he realizes that I'm not a pusher. And, I'm afraid we would just slowly coast to a long, slow death if I was the leader. So he he willingly said, "You're the guy. You should be there."
That's good. That actually takes some I don't know, courage and just admitting that, hey, I'm not the right person. This is the right person to do that. So that's amazing that he did
It
that.
it is, and I got to give credit to him too, because I am a pusher. And I've told him and other people here, many times that, to be honest with you, I'm afraid of what I'd do if he wasn't here to hold me back once in a while. So,
That's awesome. So when you say a pusher, tell me a little bit more. What do you mean by that? When you say that, I don't want to leave it open to interpretation.
yeah, yeah.
That can be, I want the right interpretation to what you mean.
Well, I'm always looking for what's the next project. What's the next 3 year goal? What's the next 5 year goal? And always pushing towards those long term goals and projects.
Okay, so you're always envisioning what's next, what's down the line, and
Right.
understanding the market dynamics and where can we go next? Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, you didn't start at the leadership role as you walked us through when I first asked you. So, can you tell us what was your first stop? So, you went to wherever you want to start, before or after your college career, but you started at a lower level role and worked your way up. And I think there's a lot of lessons, I'm sure, for people that are aspiring to, raise up to the higher roles in an organization. So can you take us back? What was that time for you at the beginning?
Um, well, you know, before college, I didn't have big aspirations of leadership at the time. I was just like most of the guys in the plant. Well, I was working for a paycheck in the weekend. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but a couple of the plant managers we had during those years had told other guys that I was one of the few people he saw there with leadership potential. But he never said that to me. So,
I gotcha. That's
uh,
interesting.
yeah. But when I did come back from college, I did have a lot of ideas, and I thought that there were a lot of things we could improve. And so, I was really excited to get the opportunity, and I saw that, hey, you know, we could expand the size of the building and, expand the number of people here and, continue to work on one shift, but it doesn't cost us anything to add a second shift.
Right.
And at the
So
time, my family was in a place where I was willing to do that.
I gotcha.
So I thought that
Let,
just made a lot of sense.
let me ask you, what changed when you left and came back that your mindset sounds like it was in a different place? What changed for you?
Oh, I'll say that, I probably had a lost decade through junior high and high school and my early working career where, I quite honestly just lived for the weekend.
I gotcha. And when you came back, you
When I
were
when
more
I went to
focused.
college, uh, um, I got with somebody that mattered to me and started to feel more responsible. And I gained a lot of ideas while I was there, and I was ready to do something about it.
I gotcha. And what was your first role when you came back where you started to have those thoughts? What was your first role coming back?
Well, my first role coming back was go back on the line, just in fiberglass instead of the steel fabrication. And
Okay.
I came back from college thinking that I would just had a job, and I was a little
Yeah.
surprised given my previous history. I guess is where my dad was coming from. But he said, I'm not going to give you your job. You're going to have to go out there and talk to the fiberglass guy if that's the job you want. And I was like, whoa, that's a real wake up call. So
Yeah. What? So what did you do? I mean, I'm
I went
sure
out,
that took you back.
I went out there and I talked to him and I told him how I'd changed. And, I stood up to the challenge and accepted it and moved forward.
So let me ask, I gotta ask you, like when your dad told you that and you went and you got the job and you started, what did that teach you? Or what could others, how could that, what was the lesson within that dynamic for you looking back?
There aren't any handouts here. I got to earn it just like every other guy.
Have you taken that and carried it forward? And do you feel like that's something that you still to this day carry?
Yeah, yeah. And I think my kids do too because of it. Because I've talked to them about that scenario and others. Um, you know, and so I think they all carry it forward too.
I think that I ask you because a lot of times I talk to private equity people that are looking at acquiring businesses and what have you. And one of the statistics that are out there, I'm sure you've heard of this, is that as you progress through the what's the word I'm looking for?
Through
Gosh,
the generations.
through it. Thank you. That's the one. The generations, the percentage of failing businesses just grows higher, and I
Yeah.
think that just that one ingredient contributes a tremendous amount because a lot of times the next generation when they get the business handed over, they come with a different set of expectations, and sometimes that sets them up for failure. And I think
Hmm.
if you're passing, your sounds like your dad did a great job with handing that off to you, and sounds like you're already working or have worked at passing that off to your kids. Would you agree with that, or what's your
Yeah.
take on that?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, we have 8 kids between me and my brother, and they all have that same kind of work ethic, but none of them want to run this place.
Oh, interesting.
So several of them work here, but they just that you know they're not driven to own and run the business.
Understood.
So actually, um, our our hope is that we can sell it to the employees as an ESOP.
You're gonna do an ESOP exit. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So let me ask you one last question before we move on. How do you build that, I guess, that work ethic and that expectation that things are not going to be handed off, so you don't spoil your kids. Can you give? I'm sure there's family business listeners also that may encounter that. I know a few come to mind. Uh, any tips or anything that's useful for people in that situation?
Um, I doubt if my dad thought that that conversation that day would be a turning point in my life, but it was. And, you know, you just never know the impact your, words will have. Um, I can think back to, one time in junior high where one of my best friends and me were walking and, I was cold and my hands were cold and I was complaining about it incessantly. And he just stopped and he asked me a couple of questions like, is that helping you? Are your hands warmer? Et cetera, et cetera. And finally, he says, well, it's not helping you and it sure isn't helping me listening to it. So just stop it. And yeah, I'm sure his point was just, I'm tired of listening to this, quit. But what I took away from that and I've lived with ever since is don't complain about something you can't do anything about. It doesn't help anyone. And so, you know, just that small conversation, if you're thinking it, just say it because you just don't know when that'll have a life-changing impact to someone else.
Right. That's good advice. Not complaining and focus on what we can control. And then just I guess shaping that mindset so that you don't feel like you're entitled to things. Any advice there for people to not have these grandiose expectations for themselves just because they're part of the family business or they have, they're in a position that they can inherit a significant wealth asset.
It's the little things you do every day, not the big things. The little things every day add up. And if you're consistent, in those positive actions, it just adds up.
So leading by example sounds like.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. All
At
right.
least for
So
me.
yeah, no, sure. Thanks for sharing that. All right. So we were back to your journey. We were in the I think you said the fiberglass area. You came back from college. Your dad put you kind of through a test. You went and talked to this gentleman. You started in that role within that department. Um, so I don't know how long you were there, but um, what did you I guess accomplish there? What I don't remember if you mentioned what your role was. What did you take over like a leadership role, or what was your role there?
Well, so right out of college, when he first let me come back to work there, I was just working in the fiberglass assembly area, and then I got into the fiberglass production area, and then I saw the opportunity for that second shift role, and so I did that, and then I got to hire a few guys of my own, and
Right. You build your entire shift.
yeah,
I got
it
you.
wasn't big. I think we had, three guys, maybe four at the
Okay.
most.
And so that was your first leadership opportunity, I guess.
Yeah,
Is that right? Okay. So,
yeah.
uh, well, tell me some of the lessons there because it's in your first role. I think, at least for me, was my experience. That's when you get some of the big lessons because you're making mistakes. Can you share maybe some of the mistakes you made, what lessons you learned while doing those or making those?
Yeah, I think, one of the things I saw my dad do was that, you know, of course, he came from a different era when, telling people what to do was a lot more common. Um, you know, but so he would tell people what he wanted, but then he would also tell them how he wanted them to do it.
Right.
And, I know that bothered me. And I figured that it probably bothered a lot of other people too. And so this is where I guess I developed the philosophy of more outcome based than, how did you do it based. So I just try to, I would try to tell people what I wanted as the end result, and if they did it the way I did it, kind of I led by example. If they did it the way that I did it, great. If they did it some other way and they still got the same result, I was fine with that. I never told anybody they needed to do it my way if they were getting the same result. It was only if they weren't getting a satisfactory result that I would start to talk to them about how they're doing it.
Right.
So that was one of the things I learned.
I gotcha. And then, so I gotta say, I gotta commend you because to a lot of leaders that doesn't come, naturally. We kind of are, to some degree, a product of our environment, right? So you're, if your sample leader, in this case your father, kind of function in one manner, you're bound to repeat the cycle and kind of continue the same. So, kudos to you for doing that. Okay, so you assembled the team, you build and I guess you gave them direction and they execute it. How long did you do that for, and what did you guys accomplish there?
Well, I did that for about a year and a half. Yeah, and we were very successful. Um, as long as I could get home and get to sleep before the light, before the sun started to shine, I was okay. Otherwise, I didn't sleep. But
Got it.
then when the day shift manager left for another job, I moved to day shift, and then I did that for um, I would guess 3 or 4 more years until the calling for the steel
For the plant manager.
fabrication plant manager came up.
So you went
And
to first
that's
shift.
probably when I learned my next big lesson.
Can I ask you one question about that other stop? So you
Yeah,
went from a smaller team to a larger team, I would assume. Is that right?
yeah,
On
a little
first
bit
shift?
larger.
Okay, okay,
I
got it.
mean,
Got it.
that one was maybe 6 people.
Okay, got it. So it wasn't like a drastic change. Okay,
Yeah.
so then you went to the plant manager role, and tell me about that. What was that experience for you?
Well, that was like drinking from a fire hose for about a year or so, but I was young, and so I didn't mind drinking from that fire hose. Actually, I enjoyed a lot of it. Um, I just had a whole bunch of new operations to learn, and well, one of the things that I learned was that every time I thought I was ready for a role, and I actually got the role, it's like, oh, there's a lot of stuff going on here that I didn't realize. So there's a steep learning curve, every time I've moved up. But after I moved over here and I appointed one of the other guys that was working on my team at the time as the new manager of the fiberglass.
Mm,
He was a totally different personality and leadership style than I was. And, as you can imagine, the team that I had developed was pretty self-sufficient. They just needed daily goals, and they knew what they needed to do to accomplish those goals. They didn't need, you know, uh, much direction at all. And he was he was officer in the National Guard.
oh, so he
So
had somewhat of a military background
he
or
he
law
did,
enforcement.
and he he micromanaged. And
Oh, okay.
what I learned was that within a year, most of those people were gone. In a year and a half, they were all gone. And
Oh,
he had
man.
replaced them with people who wouldn't move until he said jump. And so what I learned from that was my team is not your team. And so ever since then, when I look at, okay, if I want to move up, who's next? And what do they need for a team? Because I don't want to leave them with a team that doesn't fit them. Does them a disservice, and it does everybody that's on that team a disservice. So
Okay,
that
okay, I
was
see
my
what you mean.
big takeaway from that.
So did I guess you learned that in the retrospect when you first kind of went through that, that wasn't you weren't thinking through that in that way. Is that right?
No, no,
Got it. So do you think that was the because sometimes I think it's what you're saying, you have to match the right leader to the right team so that they are successful together. And
right.
so I think that what you said, it's a very strong point in our industry where a lot of times people get promoted and a lot of times they're not the right person, whether it's because of their character, like you said, the steep curve or whatever the case may be. So how do you ensure that like you have the right person? What's your thought process there to make sure you're setting up the team that you're putting under this person to be successful as opposed to ending up like the example you gave?
Um, so I don't need I don't need them to have my same leadership style necessarily. In fact, often it's good to have a little bit different change in leadership style because it brings a little vigor back to the thing after one person's been doing it for a long time. But what I focus on is, do they have the same values that I have? I mean, do they
Mm,
value the same goals in the business? Do they, value the same thing in people? And, if we share the same values, then I can be fairly certain that no matter how they do it, um, they'll be headed towards the same goal that I would be. And so I don't need to, watch them or manage them closely. I can just look at the high level stuff and see that they're still going the right direction and feel that they'll figure it out or they'll ask for help.
I'm gonna ask you just a little bit deeper. Like you can interview someone and it in conversation it looks like you have the right values. How do you go deeper beyond their words to prove it out that yes, that you really have this mindset, you really adhere to these values and so forth? Any tips there so that when people are selecting people, they don't just trust the other person's words?
Yeah. Um, I I think the only way that you can really do that. So here's one of my interview thoughts. I'd rather ask 5 questions and go deep than I would ask 25 questions and just take their shallow answer. So I want to go deep. I want you to explain to me, one or more situations about this question. And I need to know people's names, you know, not just, you know, uh, in a general way, the way people will describe things, like, yeah, they or this, whatever. I need to know the details of the story and what parts of it worked and what parts of it didn't work and what did you get from that. That shows me what their values are and how they think, because they're going to tell me what they're telling me tells me what they think is important.
Right.
If they completely skip over parts of the story that I think are important, I'm like, oh, does he even care about that part? Does he even think about that part?
That's true. Very good. Now, before we move on from that, I did have this in the back of my mind. You were talking about how you put that leader and you had built your team to be self-sufficient and they just needed direction and they just went and did that. Can you share, some tips of how do you accomplish that? Because a lot of times bringing a team together and getting them to a place where they're a well-oiled machine, where you just say, "This is the next thing," and they just go tackle it for you. It's not always an easy feat because of character, competence, or whatever the other challenges may be. So, can you give us some of the lessons there you learned? How did you accomplish that?
Yeah, I think it was just, in particular I was on such a small team, three or four guys or even six. You're there bumping elbows with them, all day long, and it's just lots of small conversations. Not a few big ones. I mean, once in a while you might have a um, you know deep conversation about some philosophy of business or something, but most of the time it's just small conversations, just reassuring them that they're doing what they ought to be doing and things like that. And if they're not, if they're not getting the right outcome, then you gotta go say, watch them. What are they doing? Where are they going wrong? What's the step that they're missing? Or they, decided that this would be easier for them, and so where does it break down? And then help them understand, you know, where it goes wrong and why this outcome is not, acceptable.
Got it. So a lot of support there. Okay, so now uh, you took over the plant manager, fabrication manager role. I think is where we left off.
Yeah.
Now you had a larger team from where you started, and you said you had somewhat of a steep curve where you realized, oh, there's so much going on. So I guess I'm going to ask you the question in verse, right? You were the leader, the up and coming leader. I'm sure you had someone leading you, or someone you reported to, and you had that steep curve. What helped you be successful? Because a lot of times we put people in a position, but we have to also support them to some degree so that they're successful. So what helped you, and what did you learn from that other people can support their people to be successful?
Mm, it's a good question. Um, we had a consultant come in one time, and I think he was amazed that I was doing what I was doing because we didn't have a lot of infrastructure. Um, we're just doing things on paper, and very, very little support from computers at that time. And he said, "It looks to me like you're just accomplished this all on sheer willpower." So,
Oh my.
but um, I got involved. Um, I'm not sure that I had a lot of personal growth for a long time there. You know, I ran the plant, and the plant didn't grow a tremendous lot. We did add some warehouse space, which was really great for a lot of people because our shipping team worked basically outside in the winter. So they all got to work inside. But our operations really didn't change for probably nearly 20 years. And I got involved in Vistage, which for people who haven't heard of that, it's a CEO group where they'll bring together 12 to 15 CEOs for one full day a month meeting. And most months, I think 8 out of 12 months, we have a really high quality speaker come in for half a day. And the other half days and full days that we don't have a speaker, we help each other process issues. And one of the beauties of it is that it's not a manufacturing group or a
Mm.
distributor group or a banking group. Um, you know, Most of the CEO chairs the Vistage shares will try to diversify their group. So, we have some distribution, maybe we have some nonprofits, maybe we have some manufacturing, maybe we have some construction, um, maybe we have some IT companies or things like that. And so it really doesn't allow you to dive deep into, their business. It forces everybody to stay at this, high level where everything's the same. It's essentially all
Mm.
strategy and people problems. And so there's a beauty in that I really appreciate. And um, I would say I would credit Vistage with teaching us enough fast enough um, that we didn't lose the business before we figured out how to run it between 2016 and 2019.
Oh, that's significant. Gosh,
Yeah,
yes.
I would say.
Wow. So, any big takeaways that you've had over the years from Vistage? I've heard good things as well about them.
Um, yeah, quite a few. The first ones were um, so at that time we had two bankers in our group, and you know we were on our the first year we made money just because nothing changed. The second year we made less money, and the third year we were in danger of not making any money. And I went to my group and I'm like, I don't understand, you know, what's different. What's what am I missing? What am I not seeing? And that was when some of the bankers started asking questions like, well, what are you doing about this? Or, do you have access to that? And I'm like, no, I don't know, and I didn't have a lot of answers. And it wasn't like they, held my hand and told me what to do, but I recognized just by the questions that they were asking, wow, I need to find out about this stuff. So we found people that could, help teach us about that stuff. And then we started getting the kind of answers we needed. And, once we could get the kind of answers we needed, we could start to make the decisions we needed to.
That's good. So a lot of it was visibility, access to information that was kind of embedded in the business that could help you make better decisions. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's really good. So, can you give us some of the things I guess you changed because you talked about people, about strategy. Can you tell us maybe a few at a high level, without revealing anything, of course, sensitive, that you felt were very impactful for the business, and what kind of impact did you see?
Yeah. So once we figured out how to run the business, my next step was that we both knew that none of our kids had an interest in it. And well, we also knew that, my dad was the founder. And like I said, he would tell people not only what to do, but how to do it. So, there wasn't a lot of um, leadership practice going on. So,
Oh, okay.
even though there was some people that were capable of it, there wasn't a lot of practice going on. And so the first thing I had to do was start building a team, with, a financial branch that could function without the president telling them what to do, and a sales and marketing branch that could function without the president telling them what to do on a daily basis, and an operations branch that could function without the president telling them what to do on a daily basis. And so starting to build that team was my next goal. And uh, we added we elevated some players in the first few years, and we started bringing in a couple of outside players, one in 2021, another one in 2022, and another one in 2024. And hey, we're getting really close to, well, I'd say we have a very functional team right now with five of us. And now I need to start looking a little further down the road because, my brother and I don't want to work here until we're in our 80s, at least not on the daily level. So
Sure.
now, how do I replace myself, and how do I replace my brother? There'll be a couple of move ups or new additions to the team as we back out a little further.
Mm. So, okay, at this point, sounds like you're already in the president role that you're in. A lot of these changes in building these teams and systems. So, tell me about that transition from being kind of an operations person for so long to now being a business level person. What was that transition like for you?
Uh, Again, it was kind of like 1994, drinking out of the fire hose.
I bet it was.
Like I said, from 2016 to 2018, thought everything was fine, and then in 2019, I realized I don't have a clue about what I'm supposed to be doing here. And so, thank God I was enrolled in the College of Vistage, because that helped me through that. And so, we got some team players in place, and then we had been on a homegrown database that we had one guy who built it over the course of almost 30 years. He was the only guy, and it was an obscure database. So there was only about 50 developers in the nation familiar with this database. And unfortunately, they were all in the same boat he was, because about 4 years ago, he came and said, "Hey guys, yeah, I'm kind of thinking it's time to retire from this. I'd like to go do more missionary work and stuff like that. So can you guys come up with a plan?" And so, we took a quick look at that developer plan for that obscure database and decided that wasn't going to work. So we went and started looking at commercial ERPs, and
Mm,
we selected one of those, and really had no idea uh, how little of the infrastructure we needed to run an ERP existed in our business. So the transition process to actually go live with the ERP took almost 3 years, because it took us 2 years to just build the infrastructure for it,
right.
and then another year for the transition. And so we've been live on that. Um, it's in for CSI, for manufacturing, and we've been live on that since December. And it's exciting because there's a lot of new opportunity there.
Yeah.
We're able to gather a lot more information. We've got back to the point, so in 6 months, we've got back to the point where we have pretty much all of the reporting we used to have. And, now we're starting to work on reporting and fine tuning what we're doing to start actually gaining ground. So very
That
exciting time.
Yeah, that's good. I'm happy that it's successful for you. ERP implementations can be challenging a lot of times. Building the infrastructure, getting the system to fit your business, or else your business has to adapt to it.
Yeah.
So I
It's a
want to
little
go back
bit, little bit of both.
a little bit of both, of course.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And of course, there's no implementation that doesn't come out with bugs at the end of go live, and you still have to rework things, and it's a invested process for sure, to say the
Yeah.
least. Now, I really I was attracted to what you said about, you had to build a sales and marketing business that could function without your daily direction, and then a manufacturing system. So I really enjoyed hearing you talk about kind of thinking about it as a system. And I think we need more of that thinking. So please tell me how, uh, what were some of the challenges? What helped you be successful as well in building something where you could step back and you no longer needed to be, uh, involved in day-to-day decisions, especially when you're talking about something as different, in terms of focus from sales, the skill set, the day-to-day work, and so for the metrics that matter, and operations, and I'm sure there are others. But can you talk about some of the main challenges and lessons you learned and what made it work?
Yeah. You know, I did learn a lot through my dad from osmosis, because he had to, uh, he ran operations, not so much after I was there, but until then, he was pretty heavily involved in operations. He was essentially the design and product development team. Uh,
Okay.
he also essentially ran the marketing department. He let the sales guys do what sales guys do. Um, and he was probably only involved in the finance part to the point where, well, there are some numbers I need to know if I'm making money or not. But beyond that, he really didn't have much care for the financial side of it. So he was that guy, except for he was involved in all those things. But he also had that fluid vision of how all these pieces fit together. And you can't have one operating at this level and one operating at this level, and expect to get good results. um, so I did learn that from him for sure. And once I since I was in operations, once I got that operations guy who valued the same things I did, only he was actually better than I was. Um,
Oh, very good.
so it took him 6 months or so to kind of learn our business, before he really even wanted to start doing things. But, once he had developed his plan and was ready to start taking action, he would check with me on stuff. And I'm like, no, that sounds right. Go, man. And once we developed that relationship where he'd develop a plan and he'd check with me and just see if there was any tweaks that I thought it needed, and I'd say go. That really freed me up to start looking at things as a whole.
Right, at the strategic level, which is a lot of times what you kind of miss out on because you're tied with the tactical. So I
Yeah.
heard empower, picking the right people, right, that align with your values, and then empowering them. I'm gonna assume that you ran into some potholes on the way, people not accepting, people not wanting to change, things like that. Were there any bumps in the road, and what advice would you have to kind of overcoming those for people going through that transition?
Um, yeah, the majority of people, um, I've found that if I'm not telling, which, from what I've said earlier, you can probably tell I'm not a big teller, but
Hmm.
I I will point out the outcomes, you know, that we need. The business needs this in order to move forward, and that's not usually that hard of a sell. And if you start asking them, how are we going to get there? Instead of
I
telling
like that.
them how we're
Yeah,
going to get there, they're invested in it. And, they have a say in it. And, they feel like it's, part of them and their responsibility, not my, I'm not responsible for this for you, but I'm responsible for this for me and the rest of our team. Everybody's counting on us.
that's good. Really like that. So winding down, you've been doing the president role for a number of years now, and I did want to ask you. You've had all you throughout this journey, people and different challenges. Can you give me, I don't know, one or two maybe values that maybe you haven't mentioned yet that you subscribe to? Like these are values that always I use to guide me in making decisions and where do I go next.
Yeah. One of them is assume good intent. It's so easy to say, think that, they're doing this because of, well, how do I know that? I should really assume good intent because I don't think I employ anybody here who has ill intent. So what I really need to understand is what did they value that made them think that was a better choice than the one I thought they should have made? You know, maybe I need to adjust my values. Maybe they pointed out something I didn't realize, or maybe I'm going to ask them to adjust their values because if I can make a good case for why my value is more important or than theirs, than what they were thinking was important, it's not an argument anymore. It's like, I brought you around to my side of the circle so you can see the color on the beach ball I'm seeing. Now, do you see why I think what I think?
Exactly. Got it. That's really good. I like that. Any others before I move on that come to mind?
Well, you know, some people, in fact, a lot of people like to think in terms of black and white because it makes things easier, makes decisions simpler, but it's not. We live in a world of gray. And, essentially, almost all decisions are a trade off. I don't gain this without giving up that. And it's, a lot of times people will just look at the what am I gaining part without considering the what am I giving up part, or, what's the bad part that I'm also gaining along with that.
That's
And
very true.
so I just feel like people should really dig in and understand the trade offs they're making, and deciding for this over that.
Gotcha. Those are two really good entries. Thank you so much for sharing that. Chris, winding down, can you if people want to get a hold of you, I'm sure there's people that are either in vintage, they are in transition in their family business, they're building their systems. If they want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to reach out? Anybody listening to this that would like to connect with you and maybe learn, dig deeper into your lessons.
Oh, yeah, sure. Um, Chris Borglum profile on LinkedIn or my email, uh, Chris, CHRIS at kpark.com, KAYPARK.
Very cool. Chris, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your lessons, your journey. It's very much appreciated. Uh, thank you. Thank you so much for doing this. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you for
Very
having me.
cool. Absolutely. And then if you're listening to this, and you have a journey that you want to share your journey, stories to tell, lessons to share, please reach out. We're always looking for someone to feature on Manufacturing Growth Talks and share some lessons from each one's journey. Until next time, thank you. This is Dan Burgos.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, let me stop here. A couple of things.